Well, just hours ago, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students stepped into a Latah County courtroom for the very first time.
This morning, he was formally charged in the deaths of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, all stabbed to death in the middle of the night in their off-campus home. Thank
you for joining us here on KREM 2 News First at 4. I'm Whitney Ward.
And I'm Mark Hanrahan. Kohberger will be held in jail without bond as he awaits trial on 4 first-degree murder charges that have a maximum penalty of death in the state of Idaho.
We have in-depth coverage for you tonight of what happened inside that courtroom this morning. Plus, we have received new documents laying out new evidence. It also reveals a new timeline of what happened inside the home the night of those murders.
We begin with KREM 2's Amanda Rowley, who was in the courtroom today as Kohberger faced an Idaho judge for the first time. Amanda?
Yeah, Mark and Whitney, this initial appearance hearing was very quick and the courtroom was completely packed with members of the media. But sitting in the front row was family members of Kaylee Gonzalez. That's one of the University of Idaho students who was murdered back in November. Now, during this hearing, we heard very little from the suspect, meaning he only spoke when needing to respond to the judge's questions, and he also showed very little emotion. Now, during this hearing, the judge read through each of the charges against Brian Kohberger, 1 count of burglary and 4 counts of murder. The max penalty for each count of murder in the first degree is death or life in prison. Now, Cooney County's chief public defender, Ann Taylor, is representing the suspect. Kohberger is currently being held in Latah County Jail with no bail. And this morning, his attorney argued against this. But the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, told the judge Idaho law does not entitle the suspect to a bond because of the charges against him, adding that he was arrested across the country from Moscow. Now, the judge decided Kohberger will remain in jail without bail. She also gave the suspect a no contact order, which prohibits him from having any contact with the victims' families, friends, and the surviving roommates. Now, shortly after the hearing this morning, we stood on the steps of the courthouse and got a comment from the attorney representing the Gonzalez family. Take a listen.
It's obviously an emotional time for the family, seeing the defendant for the first time. This is the beginning of the criminal justice system, and the family will be here for the long haul.
Now, here's what we can expect in these next court proceedings. A status conference hearing is scheduled for next week on Thursday at 10 a.m. And this is at the request of the suspect's defense attorney. Now, Kohberger's preliminary hearing has not yet been scheduled, but it must happen within the next 2 weeks. In that hearing, the preliminary hearing, the suspect will enter a plea of not guilty or guilty. Now, today I also checked in with Mad Greek. That's the downtown Moscow restaurant where Madison Mogul and Xana Kernodle, 2 of the 4 victims, worked while they were living here in Moscow. The staff tell me they do not recognize the suspect and don't recall ever serving him. Reporting from the Latah County Courthouse, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
Amanda, thank you very much. Just before Kohberger appeared in court this morning, we received shocking new details about what happened the night of the murders from newly unsealed court documents.
Inside that 18-page affidavit, a chilling new timeline is unfolding. Tonight, Tim Pham has a breakdown of those details.
We have been reading over this document since it was first released just before 9 o'clock this morning, and it's a lot to break down. So let's start off by taking a look at the new timeline that investigators laid out in the affidavit. We've known the murders happened early in the morning on November 13th, but now we are getting a closer look at what investigators believe played out. The new details lead investigators to believe the deaths happened between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Here's what happened starting at 4 a.m. according to the affidavit. Police say Xana Kernodle received a DoorDash order at the house at about 4 a.m. Cell phone data also shows that she was likely awake and using the TikTok app at 4:12 a.m. A surviving roommate who lived at the house, referred to as DM in the court documents, told police something woke her up at about 4 a.m. but thought it sounded like Gonzalez playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. At 4:17 a.m., a security camera in the area picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. At 4:20 a.m., a vehicle matching the description of the white Hyundai Elantra was spotted speeding away. A vehicle matching the description was seen again just before 5:30 a.m. on cameras in Pullman, Washington. This, of course, is only a brief overview of the timeline. You can read a more detailed account of what investigators believed happened on KREM.com. In the studio, I'm Tim Pham, KREM 2 News.
And that same surviving roommate who heard movement inside the house that night did give police a chilling account of what she saw.
That roommate's bedroom was right by Xana Kernodle's, and she told investigators that she heard and saw several things throughout those early morning hours. Channing Curtis has more of her eyewitness account.
Now, we have been poring over these court documents since they were released just before 9 this morning. In the affidavit, one of the surviving roommates gives police a chilling account of what happened on the morning of the murders, and it's absolutely terrifying. This roommate's bedroom was right by Xana Kernodle's, and she told investigators that she heard several things throughout those early morning hours. The affidavit says this roommate told investigators sometime after 4 a.m. she thought she heard crying coming from Xana's room and heard a male voice say something like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Then that same roommate says they opened their door for a third time that morning and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She says that male walked past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase. She says the male walked past her towards the back sliding glass door. She then locked herself in her room. That roommate also told investigators that she didn't recognize the person, but she did give police a detailed description of what they looked like. That description, along with cell phone records, area surveillance cameras, and a DNA match, all led police to arresting Bryan Kohberger. In the studio, I'm Channing Curtis, KREM 2 News.
Police laid out their evidence against Kohberger in these unsealed documents, including the DNA evidence they say connects him to the crime scene.
Shannon Mowdy spoke with a DNA expert today about this link to the scene. Shannon?
Inside that affidavit, we learned police found a knife sheath next to the body of Madison Mogen at the crime scene. And that piece of evidence held a minuscule clue and a huge break in this case. Police found a male suspect's DNA on the snap of that sheath, and once investigators honed in on Bryan Kohberger through his car and other evidence, Pennsylvania agents took trash from his parents' Pennsylvania home. Now, that's a common tactic to gain possible DNA from a potential suspect or a family member, according to C.C. Moore, who helped pioneer the genetic genealogy techniques that have been used to solve hundreds of cases.
It certainly appears that they retrieved his father's DNA from the trash versus his. Now, they wouldn't have known which male's DNA that would have been until they looked at it more closely. What they were then able to do was a traditional paternity comparison.
Moore says the genetic markers in your DNA are so unique, you can nearly exclude the entire global population from having the same sample. Now, in this case, investigators say 99.998% of the male population that's on the planet could be excluded as the suspect's father. Moore tells me mention of any genetic technology possibly used was correctly left out of Kohberger's affidavit because it's just a tip, not what actually leads to an arrest. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Very interesting, Shannon. Thank you very much. And one of the major elements in this case against Kohberger now is a movement of the white Hyundai Elantra the night of November 13th.
Court documents show investigators reviewed footage from several security cameras on the King Road neighborhood. There were several sightings of that Elantra between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. And coming up tonight at 4:30, we are taking a deeper look at some of the stops police say that car made on that night.
We also know the suspect had firsthand knowledge of police data tracking and capabilities. Kohberger had been studying criminology for a decade in college, and as part of his studies, we've learned he often did research on how to commit a crime.
Moscow police learned early on that suspect Bryan Kohberger had an above-average understanding of police investigative tactics. According to court records, Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. We know he received an associate's degree in psychology at Northampton Community College in Pennsylvania in 2018. He then went on to DeSales University, also in Pennsylvania, for his bachelor's degree, then his master's degree in criminal justice. It was at DeSales we learned he studied under renowned criminal psychologist Katherine Ramsland, whose books included The Mind of a Murderer and How to Catch a Killer. In May, just before he graduated, authorities confirm he posted this Reddit survey asking participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. He asked questions like, how did you leave the scene? How did you accomplish your goal? And how did you approach the victim? Investigators also now know Kohberger applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Documents state Kohberger wrote in his essay he had interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. During his time at Washington State University, Kohberger was listed as the teaching assistant for 3 undergrad classes in the Criminal Justice Department. He completed 1 semester in WSU's PhD program before he was arrested.
Now, new details continue to unfold in this case. For all of our coverage on this story, you can just text us the word Idaho to 509-448-2000, and we'll send that link directly to your phone.